a huge thank you for your unwavering support and subscribing to the Patreon and giving me money every month. Appreciate it. Hopefully the content will be more consistent soon. The more support I get, the more content I can put out, basically. I know that sucks, but I don't know. Shut up. All right, so today we're going to be checking out a darker video. This was requested by Nicholas Ferguson. Thank you, Nick, for your support and the suggestion. So this is the, what is this called? The Chilling Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Let's get right into it, guys.
So we're about to discuss a case of demonic possession so chilling and controversial that it actually became the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Okay, this is from The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I don't know if this is the one I've seen. I know there's been quite a few movies of exorcisms. I'm not sure if I've actually watched this one or not, so we'll see.
Follows is the true story that inspired The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Ooh. It's one of the few actual cases of demonic possession that went to court.
All right. Wait, did they sue the demon?
You'll find out.
Okay.
Born in 1952 in the small town of Klingenberg in Bavaria, Germany, Anneliese Michel was raised as a strict Catholic and was described as very bright and likable. In September 1968, when Anneliese was 16 years old, she experienced her first episode of losing consciousness, and later that night, she felt as if something was pressing down on her chest, pinning her to her bed. 11 months later, in August 1969, a similar event occurred, and her mother took Anneliese to their family doctor, Dr. Vogt, and a neurologist, Dr. Luthi, who examined her and even ran an EEG, a brain scan, but found nothing wrong. They hypothesized that it could possibly be a form of seizure. Over the next 3 years, Anneliese would have 2 more similar episodes and was prescribed 2 medications, an anticonvulsant medication and an anti-seizure medication called Delan.
How many of you guys believe in stuff like this? And I'll leave it at that. Just let me know in the comment.
On both occasions, an EEG would come back normal, with some minor irregular patterns, but nothing that would definitively explain her symptoms.
What year was this?
This was in 1969.
Okay, I'm fine with that so far. That sounds real.
Okay.
Little spiders on me. Sorry if I blew it on you.
Well, you did.
It was in spring 1973 that things took a turn for the stranger. Anneliese began to hear knocking sounds in her bedroom, sounds her sisters would hear as well. But even more alarming, Anneliese also reported hearing a voice damning her to hell. Her mother was further rattled when she witnessed Anneliese furiously staring at a statue of the Virgin Mary with, quote, eyes turned black, jet black, and her hands seemed to turn into thick paws with claws.
What? Those are some chunks.
Okay, so I was about to say, what if this was some sort of schizophrenia? But it said the knocking noise was also heard by her siblings, and then the mom supposedly witnessed her eyes turn black. It's all dependent on the credibility of the witnesses, I guess.
Chunky paws on her daughter. Uh-oh.
You know what? Let's move on. Let's not get caught up on the bare hands. I shouldn't have even said that part.
Yeah, we can't move past her having paws.
I knew you weren't gonna like that. I'm just
She
gonna
had
move
little
past.
kitty cat paws.
In September 1973, in a neurological visit with Dr. Luthi, Anneliese described.
Wait a minute, how long has this been going on so far? I'm sorry, let me rewind back to the date here. All right, 73.
September 1973, in a neurological visit with Dr. Luthi, Anneliese described horrific visions of demon faces that were tormenting her and stated that she felt the devil was inside her. She also reported smelling something that had the aroma of burnt feces, a stench that many around her would report smelling at later times.
Why do all these people know what burnt feces smells like?
Well, I can imagine it just smells like feces
Like
with a little,
shit on fire?
a little smokier. Fucking, oh fuck, is that a bee? See what you get? This is what you get. Yes, sick 'em. Oh, fuck.
Around this time, Anneliese's mother described these strange occurrences to Dr. Luthi, who, according to Mrs. Michel, advised them to consult a Jesuit, a claim that Dr. Luthi would later deny.
Yeah, that's a bad doctor.
Yeah, I mean, if he said that,
Don't go see it.
Yeah.
fucked up, right?
Whether or
I
not
don't know,
that's
go see a
true,
priest.
the family definitely searched for a priest and eventually found a priest named Father Alt. In November 1973, Anneliese met with a Freudian psychiatrist who diagnosed her as a neurotic with possible epilepsy, and another neurologist found she had, quote, epileptic patterns, and took her off Dilantin and put her on Tegretol, a much stronger drug. In July 1975, Anneliese's extremely odd behavior worsened. She barely slept and prayed fervently all night. She ate spiders and flies, and even licked her own urine up from the floor. She destroyed rosaries, crucifixes, and holy pictures on the walls. Anneliese also exhibited strength that was, quote, close to superhuman, throwing her sister, quote, as if she were a rag doll, and incredibly was observed effortlessly squeezing an apple with one hand until, quote, fragments exploded throughout the room.
I bet I could squeeze an apple till it
I
exploded.
bet you $1 million you couldn't.
Here we go. I mean, this is Germany. This is before preservatives.
You hear that in the distance? It's the excuse train coming.
Of course you can't, man. Come on.
Now you get to see two hands.
I wonder if any human can do
You
that.
said one hand.
Okay. But still, that's not like an amazing metric.
A priest named Father Rodewick, a man considered an expert on exorcisms by his peers, reported that he was convinced that Anneliese was possessed, and after deliberation with the bishop, an exorcism on Anneliese was formally approved. It was to be carried out by a priest named Father Renz. On September 24th, 1975, the first exorcism rite was performed. Father Renz allowed some of the exorcism sessions to be recorded.
All right, hold on. So if these priests actually approved of a sanctioned exorcism, then I would like to think that they found some sort of evidence that this was in fact a demonic possession. I mean, because otherwise I don't believe, because I've heard it's like you got to go through a lot to get an actual a real sanctioned exorcism. So I'm sure they're not all like just throwing exorcisms left and right. You know, it's had to have been some evidence there for them to see as well. So,
and 42 audio recordings of the exorcisms were made in total. I'm gonna play some clips from those recordings, but fair warning, these recordings are perhaps the most disturbing pieces of audio I've ever heard.
Ich verspreche das so, dass ich in dem Wald rein bin. Ich trag dir die Rotznase noch so lang, bis es lebt wird. Ist saublöde Weib. Für uns geht's kein Zurück. Nee! In alle Ewigkeit!
You know, she's screaming. She's giving it 110%.
I mean, do you think that sounds like it came out of a girl? Like,
Yes, it sounds like a girl doing a funny voice.
your unrelenting skepticism is exhausting. It drains me of all happiness and energy, and I hope you know that.
Ich, der Judas und der Nero, der Kain und der Hitler. Fünf Stimmen. Das ist der sechste? Oh, den haben wir gelogen.
Hitler? Wait, we lied about it.
That's all. We're all here. It's all. I ran out of evil people to think of. The blonde man from Die Hard is also in here. Skeletor from Masters of the Universe. Heath Ledger's Joker. Not Jack Nicholson. He was too cartoonish.
You had your fun,
Yeah, I've had my fun.
Okay.
Anneliese also named Fleischmann as one of her demons and provided accurate details of the real Fleischmann, who was a priest in the 1500s that was kicked out of the church for bad behavior. These details came as an icy shock to Father Alt, who claims Anneliese would have no way of knowing Fleischmann.
That is the only thing that is strange to me. All the other stuff is just things that a person could do.
To learn more about demonic possession, we sat down with Father Gary Thomas, a Vatican-approved exorcist, who explained to us different signs of possession. All of these Anneliese had.
One would be an aversion to the sacred. So a person walks in this church and can't look at a crucifix, and you only see the whites of their eyes. Another would be knowledge of hidden things, where the demon will begin to tell you things about yourself that the person themselves would have no way of knowing. Another would be possessing a kind of inordinate physical strength they don't normally possess. Then the last sign is sort of epileptic-like seizures on a person's face and the movement of their arms and legs in a way where they lose complete control.
By May, Anneliese became even worse, banging her head against the wall and biting herself and others, to the point where her family had to tie her up to prevent her from hurting herself. But most dangerously, Anneliese refused to eat. She described it as, quote, not being permitted to eat. Despite being quite frail, likely weighing under 80 pounds, she exhibited great strength when people tried to restrain her.
Yeah, I just feel bad for her at this point.
Yeah, I do feel bad for her.
She's definitely tortured.
By June, Anneliese's entire face was sunken. She also refused a doctor visit, even though she had a very high fever. On June 30th, Anneliese had another exorcism, only saying please, absolution. The next morning, her family went to her room and found her dead. Despite seeking medical attention early on, Anneliese refused to submit to medical attention in the end, as she and her family ultimately placed all faith of recovery into the exorcisms. She died of starvation at the age of 23 after 67 exorcisms, weighing only 68 pounds at the time of her death.
Do you think that just made her, like, buy into it more? If people started exorcising me on the reg.
Exercising you on the reg?
Yeah, I might eventually be like, I guess I'm demons.
I would agree with that frame of mind, but Anneliese's belief that she was possessed predates
all
the exorcisms or the priests or any of that stuff. After her death, Anneliese's parents and the two priests were accused of negligent homicide, and the case went to trial in 1978.
Wow.
What follows are the two sides of that case. First, let's review the position of the defense. The defense presented eyewitness testimony and formally submitted the recordings as evidence of possession, an idea that the court never seemed to take seriously. From a non-religious standpoint, the defense argued Anneliese was permitted to deny medical treatment, as was her lawful right. For what it's worth, medical treatment might have included tranquilizing her, force-feeding her, and electroshock therapy. Quote, all presumably against her will, end quote. Family friend Thea Hine recalled in her testimony that in 1976, a few months before Anneliese's death, Anneliese reportedly, quote, begged on her knees for Hine to not suggest medical attention to anybody. Also worth noting is the fact that Father...
What now?
Hine to not suggest medical attention to anybody. Also worth noting is the fact that Father Alt actually looked for medical help towards the end. And on May 30th, his friend, Dr. Richard Roth, visited Anneliese out of what he claims was scientific curiosity and not as a physician.
He just was like, look, I'm not here as a doctor. I just want to see some of this crazy shit.
I know, who fucking says that?
I want to see this girl eat some spiders.
That's like something you say when you go to the zoo,
Yeah.
not when you go see someone that's tied up.
That is a bad man right there.
Okay,
In his visit, Dr. Roth claims Anneliese had no external injuries, although Father Renz noted she had several bruises, a swollen cheek, and black eyes. An interesting contradiction, to say the least. Dr. Roth also denied saying, quote, there are no injections against the devil, end quote.
Shady.
shady as fuck.
Yeah.
Curiously, in spite of all the supposed epileptic attacks, an autopsy revealed Anneliese had a healthy brain with no damage that could have caused epileptic seizures. Quote, not even on a microscopic level, end quote.
What say you to that?
I mean, you know, look, I'm not a, what's a brain scientist? What
A
do we call it?
neurologist?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, it's been a long day. I'm not a neurologist. I don't know what the...
It's funny that you said that because the neurologist said the exact same thing.
He said I'm not a neurologist?
Probably it sounds like it. You might as well.
Look, I don't fucking know.
I don't know. Go visit a Jesuit.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Just get your shit
Fucking-
stink out of my office.
And even more curious was the court's seeming non-consideration of facts, such as her pupils being unusually dilated and the absence of ulcers on her body, which are frequently found in victims of starvation.
Okay, all right.
Any quotes on that?
I mean, you know.
This is great. The tables have turned, in my opinion.
Now, let's review the position of the prosecution. The prosecution argued that Anneliese had epilepsy and psychosis, and that the parents and two priests were liable for failing to act to save her life. The defense tore down notions of possession. They questioned the credibility of Father Alt, with the conclusion from two experts that Father Alt exhibited signs of schizophrenia.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Yeah, that's weird.
That's weird.
He wasn't the guy that was doing the exorcisms, but he was the guy that initially helped Anneliese in the beginning.
The prosecution also argued that the medications given successfully suppressed the epilepsy-like seizures, and argued that that suppression morphed into, quote, a delusional psychosis associated with epilepsy, end quote. They argued that Anneliese's psychosis was exacerbated by the exorcism, which only played into her fantasy. To piggyback on that, Anneliese often went through phases between exorcisms where she behaved normally, even though she would behave as a possessed person during exorcisms. It's unclear if the epilepsy-like seizures were stopped by medication or if they actually stopped on their own. But Anneliese's psychotic visions predate the alleged medical suppression.
Weird.
Weird.
Sorry.
Basically, they're saying that the psychosis was brought on by the suppression of the drugs.
Yeah.
But this psychosis
happened.
predates the drugs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In the end, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution, sentencing the 4 defendants to 6 months in prison with suspension for 3 years and payment for all court costs. The court ruled that Anneliese was unable to make decisions for herself and should have been forced to submit to medical care. Professor Felicitas D. Goodman, an author of a book on the case, notes the theories that Anneliese was epileptic were presented as, quote, a statement of undisputable fact, not conjecture, as in fact they had been, end quote.
How do you tell the difference between possession and mental health?
Sometimes both are going along side by side. You have to determine what is the root cause of the suffering of this individual. You start out with a discernment, and the discernment involves myself and a whole team of people. I have a medical doctor, a clinical psychologist, and a psychiatrist. In fact, a formal exorcism only happens as the last resort.
Given the evidence that we've seen and all the strange occurrences and the voices, I think there is sufficient evidence to not conclusively rule out that she was possessed beyond a reasonable doubt.
Sure.
So you acknowledge that.
I acknowledge there's a lot of factors in this case. I personally think there's something going on with mental health, and I also think that 67 exorcisms probably don't leave your mind in a good spot.
I could see both sides. I could see how it would be mental health. I could see how it would be possession. I lean towards possession. That being said, she should have gone to the hospital.
Yeah, get that girl to a hospital, please.
She's possessed or not, fucking force her to go to the hospital and let the doctors be like, holy shit, the shit's floating around.
PSA, if your kid's eating spiders.
Don't take him to an exorcist. Take him to an exorcist, but do it at the hospital.
No, don't take them straight to the hospital.
You can do both. That's what I'm saying. You can do both. You can have it happen at the hospital.
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
Regardless of the court ruling, many have debated what actually led to Anneliese's death. Was it a case of mental illness, possibly epilepsy? Or was this a legitimate case of demonic possession? Whatever the real reason may be, the case of Anneliese Michel is a tragedy and will always remain unsolved.
Is that it?
I think we're done here.
No, we're not. I'm gonna crush this.
You're not crushing it.
I'm gonna get some juice out of this thing.
I don't know what's making me happier, the fact that you can't get it, or the struggle in your face as you see your case slipping through your fingers.
This
like
is not
grains
the
of
case
sand.
slipping through my fingers.
Just like grains of sand just falling.
All right, guys, let me know what you thought about that. I can't call it on either side, whether it be a case of mental illness and then, dozens and dozens of exorcisms on top of that, I would assume might influence your state of mind. What do you guys think? And let me know what you think about this content, and if you would be interested in seeing more, if you want more of content such as this. I don't know, y'all let me know what you want to see next. Thanks again, Nicholas Ferguson, for suggesting this. It was very interesting. I will catch you guys on the next one.